over my life is being able to spend a lot of time with my grandparents. Growing up in Miami, Florida, I had my paternal grandmother who lived with me, and then I had my other grandparents who literally lived walking distance around the corner. And so because I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, I watched grandparent television, and so a lot of grandparent television is, like soap operas and stories, and game shows, And so I would really get into the game shows. As a matter of fact, we love the game shows so much that my grandfather actually had the opportunity to be on The Price is Right. Like, that was like a highlight of our life because he had no idea what he was doing. But it was just a great moment that we got to celebrate with him. But I think one of my all-time favorites is Family Feud, right? We love watching Family Feud, watch the original version of that. And then, I still watch it from time to time with Steve Harvey, as the host. And Family Feud is interesting because, they do these surveys and they have these questions. And so you have to try to think about like how other people are thinking or what they are thinking the answers would be. So here's what I want to do to kick us off this weekend. I want us to pretend like we're on the Family Feud. All right. So we're going to pretend like we're on the Family Feud. Now, I'm not going to have contestants come up and you're not going, we're not going to have we're not going to do the real reenactment. But I do have a survey question that is related to the series that we are in right now, talking about the good life. So the survey question is, what makes for a fruitful and fulfilling life? Look at that. That's awesome, right? Gotta love the creative director we have, Pastor Trevor. I think we're going to keep him. Think we're going to keep him. All right. So what makes for a fruitful and fulfilling life? And so anybody have any sort of, okay, I heard prayer. All right. Okay, hold on. So I heard prayer. Hold on, I got you, Dave. I heard what you said. Okay, so we got prayer. All right. You know what? We don't have like the real reenactment, so we don't have the we don't have the thing, so we don't have any of that. So I'm gonna just wait till the end to just show you the whole thing, right? Or Pastor Trevor, I actually don't even know how we have it. Do we have it like by? Oh, we do. Actually, we do. Okay, hold on. Let me keep getting some more answers. All right. I heard friendship. Right. Anybody else? Money. Okay, I heard money. Anybody else? Oh, somebody clapping for money. All right. We did just talk about giving. All right. Anybody else? Huh? Impact. Okay. Discipline. All right. Y'all got some good answers. Let me take two more. Rest. Okay. Love. Somebody said love. All right. Thank you. All right. So let's see what the survey says. All right. Number one, prioritizing time. All right. Number two, meaningful relationships. All right. Number three, appreciation and gratitude. All right. Number four, purpose and fun. And so here's the thing. I didn't really take a survey, I didn't really ask people, but I did some research. All right. And the research produced basically these four things in some sort of combination or some sort of order. There was even a motivational speaker who said, well, if you really want to have a fulfilling life, you need to look inward. You need to look inside yourself. I also read about this story that is, or this study, I should say, that's based upon a book called The Good Life. And this was a Harvard study where they took 724 men, and it's the longest running study since 1938, and it's still ongoing. Now, some of the ladies in the room already know that this is a problem because it's 724 men. So we know the survey is a little skewed already, right? Somebody say amen. But the survey revealed that the study revealed that the most fulfilling factor in one's life, and this would be the case no matter, I think, who you asked over time, men and women, they said it was relationships. And the person leading the study from Harvard, this is what he said. He says, the lessons learned were not about wealth. They weren't about fame. Working harder and harder, the clearest message we get from this 75-year study is this: good relationships keep us healthier and happier. But here's the thing. Our problem is we're constantly investing in not relationships, but quick fixes. You know, we're getting these messages on Instagram and Facebook and wherever else that's telling you how to do something quick. Like, hey, you can invest this amount of money and like, no, you don't need no experience. Matter of fact, you use other people's money and just all of this stuff, right? For quick fixes. I even asked a version of this question on Instagram this week that maybe some of you saw. And as I suspected, the top answer was, oh, relationship with God. And so I'm thinking in my mind, is that your real answer or is that what you think is the right answer? Right? Because our everyday lives and how we choose actually reveals the real answer. It actually reveals what we really think, how we are invested. And by and large, we believe that what we produce is the most important thing because that's how we live our lives. We're measuring based on production. Now, there was also a study that was done asking millennials, what do you think is the most meaningful and fruitful thing or fruitful aspect of your life? And they said money and fame, or money and pursuing a platform. It's because production is what we value and production is what gets rewarded. Now, before we poo-poo on the millennials, all right, the same men in this Harvard study, they said the exact same thing in the very beginning when they were asked. They were asked and they said money and platform or career. This is what they said. But something happened over time and something changed. At some point, they understood that there was more meaning in life and that life actually produced more fulfilling things outside of money and all of these other things that we pursue. And yes, we should care about what we produce. And yes, what we do produce impacts our quality of life. But what is most significant requires a different focus and investment. And this is what Jesus is teaching us in the Gospels. Yes, he cares about what we produce. And yes, he wants us to have a good and fulfilling life. But the problem is, we don't necessarily like the terms. We don't necessarily like the metrics. We don't necessarily like the method by which Jesus says we can obtain this good life. So you know what we do? We just make little minor adjustments. Well, maybe today, or maybe we can he didn't really mean that part, right? So today we zoom in on John 15 to examine what Jesus says about producing. What does Jesus say about like what we produce and production, right? In this series, we're talking about the good life. And yes, our life should produce good things. But Jesus said, the reason I have come is so that you might have life and have it to the fullest. So just a recap of the series. Week 1 in this series about the good life, we talked about don't worry about a thing. Like Jesus said in Matthew 6, hey, seek me first, everything else will take care of itself. So take no thought for what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear. That's like 80% of our decisions every single day. And Jesus said, don't worry about it. Week 2, Pastor Jamaica last week talked about holy rest. Jesus said, bring everything to me and I will give you rest. I heard somebody say in the survey earlier, fulfilling like rest. That's somebody who like naps. And this week, we examine John 15, where Jesus makes a bold statement. One that would challenge us every single day of our lives if we actually fully embraced it. So let's zoom in on John 15, 1 through 8, and hear Jesus' words. Here we go. I'm reading from the CSB version. We'll have the words up on the screen for you as well. You can follow along. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. Every branch in me that does not produce fruit, he removes. And he prunes every branch that produces fruit so that it will produce more fruit. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, and I in you. Just as a branch is unable to produce fruit by itself unless it remains on the vine, neither can you unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. The one who remains in me and I in him produces much fruit, because you can do nothing without me. If anyone does not remain in me, he is thrown aside like a branch and he withers. They gather them, throw them into the fire, and they are burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you want, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you produce much fruit and prove to be my disciples. In this third week of this series, The Good Life, I want to just use for a subject for this message: our results are in our roots. The results are in the roots. We could probably do a 3-part series just on these verses that we just read in John 15, 1 through 8. But for the sake of time, I just want to zoom in on this idea, this aspect of production and producing, because that's a major focus of the world that we live in today. Again, this is how we measure, this is how we value. And it's interesting that Jesus said, you know, God is actually glorified by your production, by how or what you produce. And he wants us to produce much, right? He wants much fruit production from us. But he also says that our fruit, what we produce, is an indicator of our discipleship. Meaning, what we produce reflects who or what we follow or where we are invested. The word disciple, the Greek word methetes, means learner or pupil. In the English translation, it just simply means follower, right? So whatever or whoever your root system is tied to, that's going to influence your fruit at the end of the day. Where, how, with whom we are planted matters greatly. I recently, in my research and in my reading, and I love reading these very interesting and fascinating things. My wife teases me and says, like, you know, some of the most random facts about things. It's because, like, I just follow rabbit trails, you know, like I just follow what interests me. And every now and then I can have a good run on Jeopardy just because I got this random stuff stored up in my brain. But listen to this. I found this out as I was reading about trees and root systems. I found out that even dead trees, whether they're dead and they haven't been cut down, or even the ones that have been cut down and you can just see the stump, right? These roots still influence the ecosystem around it, even though the tree itself is dead, because the roots are still alive. The roots are still giving life. The roots are still collecting and passing on nutrients. Well, if they're nutrients, right? Think about the implication of this in our everyday lives. Well, we are connected to people and things and maybe even stuff that we think is cut down in our life, or maybe it is, but the roots are still impacting us. Now, that's good if the root system was good. That's good if stuff that was passed on to us, you know, helps us as we move forward. But that's really bad if it isn't. And so some stuff we think is cut down, is cut off, but we're still carrying the influence of that in our lives because those roots have not been uprooted. And it still has influence over us. This is so important because this is why Jesus says clearly 7 different times, he says, remain in me. Where, how, and with whom you are rooted is significantly important. And Jesus said 7 times. Now, when my mother repeated stuff, I don't know how y'all grew up, but when my mother repeated something, that was a problem. And if she got up and came towards me, then we are definitely in trouble. Now, we don't see what Jesus gets up, but he said it 7 times. So that lets us know it's important. So I just want to make 2 points of clarification here, because we don't have time to unpack the whole thing, but just 2 points of clarification in the verses that we just read. The first clarification here is Jesus wants us to understand, okay, who are the players in this story? Like, who are the players in this scenario, right? And so he's using a agricultural metaphor because it was an agrarian society. This is what people understood: farming, planting, all those sorts of things. And so he wants us to know who's who and like who has what roles. So he's using an agricultural metaphor here. And so he says, all right, this is what it is. Jesus is the vine. That's Jesus who's talking. He says, I'm the vine. God is the gardener. And you, me, us, we are the branches. The first observation I have here is really interesting because Jesus says he's a vine, right? I mean, a vine is not really that sexy, right? It's not really like we don't love vines, you know. Like you see, like we pulling them, and you know, some of them sometimes they look like weeds, you know. But they're unassuming and they're spreading plants. Jesus didn't say, "I'm the redwood, I'm the sequoia." I mean, these big, you know, strong like tree. He didn't say that, right? We can kind of flow with that. But you know what Jesus is doing? He's speaking to his humility, is what he's doing. And he's showing us how we need to identify in the world as well, if we are Jesus followers. Because how we think about ourselves and how we identify ourselves is significant. And many of our challenges have to do with improperly identifying ourselves. We don't know who we are. We don't know what we are. And so Jesus gives us a clue here. He says, I am the vine. Like it is, again, an unassuming, spreading plant is what it is. Secondly, he says, God is the gardener. So God is the one who's managing, he's overseeing, you know, production and managing growth. And he's also cutting things, all right, that are problematic. So he's cutting them away. But then here's the other thing that sometimes doesn't feel good. He's also cutting in areas where there is growth to produce more growth. Because sometimes the growth we experience inhibits the future growth that we will have. Yeah. And so cutting away or God just making adjustments helps us to grow even more, because the goal is to produce more fruit. So this is God's job. But nothing pleases the gardener more than when there's growth. And nothing frustrates the gardener more than when there isn't growth. I got a ZZ plant that I brought with me. Y'all, you guys know, some of you guys know me. No, I love plants. And so, no, it just broke, but that's okay. It's a sad moment. My little ZZ just broke off. All right. That's all right. Well, maybe this is the pruning, cutting, metaphor. Maybe. That's all right. We'll fix it. But here's the thing. This is my little ZZ plant. This is called a Raven ZZ because it's very dark. There's another version that I have as well. That's just the regular ZZ plant. But I got this plant and I rescued it, right? It was just sitting on the shelf at like Home Depot, and I just walked past. It just spoke to me, and I grabbed it and I looked at it. It was in tough shape, right? It was some stuff hanging off of it. It was some stuff turning brown. But I knew that, listen, it still had life. So I brought it home and I kind of, cut up the little branches that was, kind of fading on it. And for weeks and weeks and weeks, I've been looking for growth. I hadn't seen anything. And the other day, I just looked down. You can't even see. You have to look down. I just looked down and I saw some new growth. And I was so excited about this, and I was so happy and so encouraged. And this is what happens in our life when we start producing. This is how God feels about our lives when we are growing healthily. He's excited about it. Just like I'm excited about my ZZ plant. Now, y'all pray for my wife who's not as excited about it, but that's okay. That's all right. I'm going to just keep this right here so nothing else get broken. All right? Say, finally, we are the branches, right? We're the branches. And the branches grow out of the vine. They're connected to the vine. And what happens with the branches, which is significant, is that fruit grows on the branches. So that tells us that as Jesus is explaining and using this metaphor, that he wants us to produce fruit, and that's important to him, that's important to God. And so our lives being productive is important, but God cares about what is being produced. Second point of clarification here is, number one is who are the players? The second is, how are we actually going to produce? Well, there's really only one way that we can produce fruit, according to Jesus. And he said it 7 times, remain in me. Now that seems very strange. It seems very odd, right? So is Jesus saying like, I can't produce if I'm not connected to him? If I'm not connected or rooted in him, I can't produce. This seems confusing, right? Well, let me help you. Jesus is not talking about the success of this world. He's not talking about how we measure success. He's talking about submission. That's completely different. Jesus is saying, listen, you can't do anything without being submitted and connected to me. You can't produce fruit, the kind of fruit that I want you to, not being connected to me. So this whole idea, Jesus is talking about posture. We need to have a certain posture, which is the posture of submission, because we can't produce the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, and then we got these other stuff, kindness, perseverance, and long suffering. We don't like those fruits. But Jesus said, listen, you can't produce that without being connected to me. Here's the thing. You can maybe produce a little bit of it, but you will never experience or never get to the fullness of what you can produce without being connected to Jesus, without being fully submitted to him. You know what Jesus is saying? Y'all can't produce on that level. Not without me. And let me tell you how this is true. I know this is true. You know how somebody really upsets you? You're not really thinking about how much you can love them in that moment, right? You know how, like, when you really have been going through a season and you want to get out of this season, you're not really excited about the fruit of long suffering, right? Or perseverance. But those are fruit of the Spirit. What Jesus said, you can't push through and you can't get on that level. It won't happen without being connected to me. The second thing Jesus is saying here, when he talks about how we're going to produce, is he said, we got to stay in the right place. And the right place is to stay connected to him, because God will make you prolific. He will help you produce. But here, you know what Jesus is talking about? He's talking about proximity, is what he's saying. Because that glorifies God. Not because God is egotistical, but God is glorified and God is honored and God is excited when we produce. And I wanted to think about how I can help us think about this practically, right? So why Jesus says remain in him, and then if we remain in him, we produce on another level. So the very practical example I came up with is a microphone. Just think about a microphone for just a second. Without this microphone, I could project my voice and you could hear me, but I would be working a lot harder than I'm working right now, right? I could, yell and again, you guys could hear me back, but I would be working really, really hard. But with a microphone, I could have further reach, right? I could project my voice in a certain way because the microphone has an amplifier in it, which means I don't have to work that hard. So what that means is that Jesus is saying is that being connected to him amplifies our life. And we don't even have to work that hard at it. And some of us are working so hard, and Jesus said, listen, all you have to do is stay connected to me and I will amplify, I will grow, I will help you produce. I will amplify your efforts if you remain in me. And he put this little thing on the end, and my words remain in you. Which means we need to know Jesus' words. We need to understand scripture. We need to understand what he's saying to us. All right, let me see if I can land the plane for us like this. I mentioned the Harvard study that began in 1938. It's ongoing still to this day. They're in the fourth director. Some of the men who started out in the study are still in the study. They're in their 90s now. And here's the thing. They concluded, and they wrote a whole book on this the book is actually called The Good Life. They concluded what I said earlier, that relationships are the key fulfillment. And so here's the thing. All Jesus is saying in John 15 is that there's one key relationship that's the domino to everything else. That's it. And it's also the reason why Jesus said, listen, all of this extra stuff, let me just simplify it to you like this. All of the commands, let me just simplify it. Love God and love people. Or love your neighbor. That you know what that's called? Relationships. Not situationships. Relationships. And you know what? All the Harvard study confirms is what Jesus already said and how God already set up the design. Because we are only as strong as our relational connections. When I was growing up, I used to watch the Super Friends. It's a cartoon. And, I'm turning 45 tomorrow, so I'm dating myself. Some of y'all are like, who? But the Super Friends, that's like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman is a bunch of them together. Kind of like, the Avengers before the Avengers or whatever. But there were these little known or lesser known Super Friends called the Wonder Twins. There we go. The Wonder Twins, right? And so here's the thing about the Wonder Twins, right? So let me make sure I get this right. So Zan had the ability to change into any state of water. So it could be ice, it could be gas, like whatever. You can change any state of water. And then Jaina, his sister, had the ability to change into any animal, right? But here's the thing. They had this superpower, but they couldn't activate it unless they were in proximity to one another and they touched one another. So they had this ability, but unless they touched and they spoke in each other's presence, it would not activate. Jesus and the Holy Spirit are the Wonder Twins, y'all. They're the Wonder Twins. Because listen, there's no way for us to really follow Jesus without the Holy Spirit because we can't do it on our own. We need something to activate, right? Here's the context of John 15. We heard Jesus' words. He's talking to his disciples, but here is the context. It's after the Last Supper. Jesus is about to go to the cross. It's about to get real chaotic. It's about to get crazy. And he knows that the disciples are going to be tempted to scatter. They're going to be tempted to disconnect. They're going to be tempted to go in their own direction. And Jesus is encouraging the disciples, listen, stay connected, remain, stay connected, don't stray. Remain, stay connected, be with me, follow me, remember my words, stay connected. And I think the same thing is being said to us, to somebody today. Stay connected. I know you're worried about this job. I know you're worried about this thing over here. I know you're worried about this relationship. I know you got this thing going to remain in me. Hey, just follow me. Listen, just stay focused. You're going to be tempted to try to make it happen on your own. You're going to be tempted to maybe even walk away, but just remain. And here's the thing. Our adversary, remember Jesus said, I have come that you might have life and have it to the fullest. He said, but your adversary has come to steal, kill, and destroy. But here's the thing. He doesn't have power over you to do that. You know what his only power is? Marketing. He can only suggest. And so what he does is he sends us suggestions that God has forgotten about us. He sends us suggestions that God is taking too long. He sends us suggestions that we're not good enough. He sends us suggestions that this might be a good temporary solution. All he has the power to do is to suggest. And Jesus is saying, listen, just remain. And it will lead to a good and fulfilling life. What the enemy is suggesting to us is going to lead to a depressing, dark, and unfulfilling life. So I want to challenge you to do two things as we close. For some of us, the challenge right now, real time today, what time is it? 12:23, is literally trying to remain, trying to stay focused, trying to follow. I mean, even transparently right now, for myself, that's always the temptation. You know why? Because I'm a get it done kind of guy. I'm trying to make stuff happen. I'm trying to go here and think about this and do this. And Jesus is saying to me, I went on my walk this morning at, 6:30 this morning, at 6:15 this morning. I went on my walk and I'm listening to my own message being preached to me in my head. Joshua, remain. Just remain in me. Just remain. I know you're worried about this thing over here. I know you're trying to fix this thing over here. I know this thing is going on over here. Just remain. Remain. That's the challenge for some of us real time right now. The second could be, hey, you know what? I've already tried to do this thing on my own. I've tried everything. I maybe actually following Jesus is what I need to do right now. I don't know who that might be here for today, but you really need to actually say, okay, I'm going to make a commitment to actually follow Jesus. Not go to church every now and then, not try to say a prayer here or there, but literally follow Jesus. And maybe you're following Jesus and you need to take a step towards baptism, which baptism is a public profession of our faith. And it's really like hitting a reset button where we identify with Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, where we're raised up into new life. So here's what I want us to do. We're not going to have the band come up today to close us. I just want us to have some real talk with Jesus right now. I am going to ask the prayer team to come down, because some of us need to have someone to connect with in prayer. And the prayer just simply needs to be, will you pray with me to help me remain? This is kind of what I got going on. Will you just pray with me to help me remain? And let the prayer team speak words of life over you. Or maybe you just need to have a moment at your seat right now. So we're just going to pause. You can close your eyes, you can bow your head, you can do whatever you like. And I know it might be a little awkward, but listen, God cares more about what you got going on than you care about what you got going on. So let's just have a few moments right now.